Hello. Welcome to the show about stuff, the Stephen Davis Show.
Welcome to a podcast show about stuff. It's the show about stuff, the Stephen Davis Show. Here's your host, Stephen Davis.
Branded gifts for the holidays, birthdays, or just because. Visit us at www.thebreakstore.com. Hit the right black Get in Touch button.
Hey. Guess what? The show about stuff, the Stephen Davis Show, is on vacation until September of 2023, when brand new episodes will begin. We will miss you, but it's time to get rejuvenated. In the meantime, I will release some older videos that I and others have produced for your summer viewing pleasure. Have a wonderful summer. The following video is part one of a two-part major summit that the African American Leadership Summit, a nonprofit organization that I founded and served as its president, held. It was presented at Medgar College in 1993 in Brooklyn, New York. You decide if the issues of 1993 are still relevant in 2023, 30 years later. Enjoy.
We come together today not to lament about our condition, for it is clear to us what that state is. Rather, we come together today to forge new initiatives, new relationships, explore new paradigms, to offer constructive solutions to the conditions and pathologies that we find in our community. We may differ on the approach that we may embrace or use, but let us not differ on the objective, and that is to liberate our people. We must keep our eye on the prize. We must not falter along the way. Let us recreate a stable family to bring about new hope and opportunities, to liberate our people from the shackles of economic insufficiency. For every country understands that there is a direct correlation and relationship between the quality and level of education and the economic development of a community. So we come together today to explore how we may accomplish these matters. So put on your thinking cap. Let us have a productive day, and again, welcome to the great Medgar College.
Thank you very much, President Jackson, and I know that you all must feel as I do. You do feel welcome here at Medgar. because you're part of our family. And President Jackson has opened the doors of this college to the community, and we think of everyone who comes to Medgar as a part of the Medgar Evers College family. So you are indeed welcome, and we appreciate your being here with us today. To continue with the program now, we'd like to bring to you Dr. Vernal Gordon-Cave, who will bring you the chairman's remarks on behalf of the African American Leadership Summit. Dr. Cave.
Thank you very much. Dr. Jackson, you are indeed right when you say that we are at present in the great Medgar Evers College. But it is so also because we have a great president, Dr. Edison Jackson. And on behalf of the African American Summit, Leadership Summit, I want to express our thanks and appreciation when, after our first meeting, Dr. Jackson let it be known that we were welcome. And so we're here today to continue a struggle which started a long time ago when some of our ancestors were brought across the Atlantic Ocean to make America and all of this part of the world a happy place for them with our labor. We continue the struggle. What we are doing now is just working on moving forward to some time or other reaching some kind of parity. It's a long struggle, but we intend, as our predecessors done, to stay with it. You're going to hear from some very informed people today, and it is my privilege now to introduce to you a longtime friend, one of our really distinguished citizens, Congressman Ed Owens. Came to know him first when he was borough president, and followed his career, and I've watched the things that he has done for the advancement of the African American portion of our great nation. He is now moving up into more and more powerful positions in the Congress so that he is better able to influence legislation which will advance the cause of the common man, and in so doing, advance the cause of African Americans. He sits today on the Energy and Commerce Committee, on the Subcommittee on Health, on the Government Operations Committee, and he chairs the Human Resources Committee. Last year, somebody decided to challenge him and asked him to move over. But from north and south and east and west, they came together and he scored a tremendous victory. I don't believe anybody is going to spend a great deal of money to try to move out Ed Owens. It is my privilege and your privilege to hear Congressman Ed Owens.
Thank you very much, Dr. K, for those very kind words. It's always good to have something nice said about you when you're involved in the political arena. Dr. K, thank you, thank you. Also, let me give thanks to Steve Davis for bringing us together. And of course, Steve, we want to let you know that we appreciate this, and it's something that is definitely needed. I also like to thank Dr. Jackson for opening the doors of Medgar Evers College and allowing all of us to come in. Medgar Evers is a very important institution in our community, and those of us that live in Brooklyn should never forget that. So give Medgar Evers and Dr. Jackson another round of applause. And to our elected officials, and to, of course, our keynote speaker, Brother Edie, and to all of you that are assembled here, I'm delighted to come and to be a part of this great day. The Clinton administration economic recovery plan will mean very little to our community if we're not prepared to take the advantage of the situation. I know that many of us have reached the point where we want to give up. After 8 years of Ronald Reagan and 4 years of Bush, we just basically feel that nothing will ever happen for us again. An administration that told us that catch up to our children, looked them dead in the eye and said to them, look, ketchup is a vegetable. I lived in North Carolina for 13 years. I got enough sense to know that if ketchup is a vegetable, grits has got to be a dessert. But we can't listen to that. We must now rise up, and when the doors of opportunity open with this administration, and I do believe they're going to open, that we have to be prepared to walk through. And I think that occasions like this make it right for us to be able to come through. I think that we cannot get involved in the squabbling. I think that we have to look at a new strategy. We have to, if we're going to demonstrate, as we demonstrate in front of that store, we have to talk about a plan while we walk in front of that store. Because we can't close that store that we don't own and make it impossible for our grandmother to be able to go get the goods. We have to make certain that we open our own stores if we close down the store in our neighborhood. We also have to make certain that pension plan, pension money, it has to be utilized in our communities. Let's face it, in this country alone, $400 billion, and that's B as in boy, come from us, the minority community. If they can build the harbor in Baltimore and the seaport over in Manhattan, I'm telling you now that they can put some of that money in Bedford-Stuyvesant, Brownsville, Flatbush, East New York, and areas where we live as well. So this is what this is all about this morning, economic development. I do believe that if Martin Luther King was here today, I do believe that if Marcus Garvey was here today, I do believe that Fannie Lou Hamer was here today, I think they would talk a little bit about economic development. I think that would be the subject that they would deal with today. So we have to make certain that we do not lose sight of economic development. And let me close on this note, that we have to recognize that there is a correlation between unemployment and going to jail. We have to recognize that. So if we want to make certain that our children are able to stay out of these institutions, then we have to make certain that we provide jobs for them to make certain that they have an opportunity to work. It's hard for kids to go to college and to be able to learn when they know that when they finish learning that they can't come out and earn. That is very frustrating for them, and we need to understand that. So I come this morning to say to you that economic development is the way to go. That in this country, how we can get ready so that when that door swings open, that we are prepared to walk through with our proposal and to say to you, to them that, look, we know what needs to be done in our community because the research has already been done. We know how many hamburgers we eat. We know how many potato chips we eat. We know how many Coca-Colas and Pepsi-Colas we drink. So all we need now is an opportunity to be able to perform. Thank you, Steve, for bringing us together to talk about economic development.
I'd like now to recognize some of the special guests who are with us today. And if I neglect to mention someone's name, please forgive us. Our list is incomplete. And as additional people arrive, we will let you know who they are so that you too may greet them at the appropriate time. I'd first like to recognize the Honorable Lenora Fulani, who is here with us today. The Honorable Una Clark, from whom you will be hearing later today. Honorable Priscilla Wooten. You will also be hearing from Councilwoman Williamson later today. Regina Hillary, President of AGEE. Okay. The NAACP Youth Committee. Are you here? Would you stand? And Mr. Bill Waters, MCM Corporation. We welcome all of you. We are very pleased to have you with us today. To continue with the program now, according to our program, we had hoped that the Honorable Mayor David N. Dinkins would be with us at this time. He is not. And so, to bring remarks on behalf of the Mayor, we have the Honorable Wallace Ford.
When I speak on behalf of the mayor on a number of occasions, I have opportunity to be in a number of our churches, and when I'm in church we get a call and response, and if I don't get that, it throws my entire rhythm pattern off, and I've got to give a much longer speech here. So we'll try it again. Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, thank you. It certainly is a privilege and a pleasure as your Commissioner of the Department of Business Services, the department which is responsible for a significant part of the economic development activity that takes place in the city of New York. It's my privilege and pleasure to be here on behalf of the 106th Mayor of the city of New York, David Dinkins. If the Mayor were here today, I know he would want me to convey a couple of things, and briefly, because I know we have a very long program and a very important program. But there's 3 points that I think it's extremely useful to make mention of within the context of this summit. First of all, we have to look at the issue of using history as a tool. We look at the fact that we look at the facts of our history in this country, our history before we came to this country, and many people will use that history and our experiences as a reason for despair. They will look at our history and say, these are the reasons why we cannot do things today. These are the reasons why we're in the conditions that we are today. These are the reasons why we have so many problems. I would suggest to you, though, ladies and gentlemen, that there's more to that in our history because it really is a basis for progress. We are not victims. We have never been victims. We were not born to be victims. That is not part of our heritage. That is not where we are. That is not where we're going. We have to absolutely reject the notion of looking at ourselves as victims as a matter of course, because throughout history, we have our achievements. We have our achievements that we must celebrate. We have our achievements that we must point out. We most of all have to look at the fact that we indeed are the sons and daughters of people who prevailed over the Middle Passage. We are the sons and daughters of the people who did indeed prevail over slavery. We are the sons and daughters of the people who prevailed over the absolute disappointment that came about at the end of Reconstruction. And we are the sons and daughters of people who, as we go into the 21st century, stand at the threshold of great achievement if we will seize that opportunity. And I do believe we have the capability of seizing that opportunity. I would not stand here in this summit and suggest that we do not have our challenges, we do not have our problems in our community. Of course we do. But I'm also here, I will stand here and say that we have the capacity to do something about them. We have the capacity to address those challenges. We have the capacity to address those problems. We have a way of going forward. It's already been mentioned in the comments that we are indeed seeing as a part of the liberation movement, if you will, of African Americans in these United States of America, that we are looking at economic development. That's not, of course, something that just came about in 1993. We have to understand that throughout our history, we have indeed seen comments, we have seen movements with respect to the issue of economic development, but quite frankly, it has been a missing component over the last 20 to 30 years as part of our overall agenda in moving forward. Economic development in these United States of America has to be a part of our liberation strategy. And I use that term purposely, a liberation strategy, that we have to have a plan. We have to make some decisions as to where we want to go, set some goals, set some objectives, and go there. It is not enough to say we want it to be better. It is not enough to say we don't want it the way it is right now. We have to say something more. We have to say where we're going to go. If economic development is going to be a part of that process, what resources do we have? We spend over $300 billion a year in this country. We spend it on shoes, we spend it on cars, we spend it on liquor, we spend it on cigarettes, we spend it on any number of consumer goods. We are some of the greatest consumers in the world. We should never think, I would submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, that the entire answer, the total answer, is going to come from the government in Washington, from the government in Albany, or even the government here in New York City, because government-based economic development is not going to be enough to sustain the kind of growth, to sustain the type of activity, to sustain the movement that we need, and particularly when we have the capability to control our own destiny. We have the capability of doing something with what we have if we will summon the will to do it. And I'm telling you that we have the ability to do that. We, again, as I said before, are the sons and daughters of people who have prevailed. They didn't just survive, they prevailed over tremendous odds, tremendous circumstances, tremendous adversity, and here we stand in 1993 with the capability of doing something, because we say, what can we do with what we have? And understand that there is indeed a connection between the economic development and the political process. Right? Because when we talk about what we have a capability of doing, we have dollars in our hands that we can do something with. We also have a vote in our hand that we can do something with, but we have to decide what's important to us. People will come to us all the time in the communities where African Americans live and say to us that when we talk about economic development, for us, we talk about jobs. Right? I'm here to tell you that I reject that notion. All right? I reject the notion of speaking to us solely about jobs. Because we have to understand where jobs come from. Jobs come from businesses that have a capability of meeting a payroll every week, every 2 weeks, that are functioning, profitable, productive, progressive businesses. And who are those business owners, or who will those business owners be? There's no problem and there's no shame in being an employee, but there's also some great pride in being an employer, a manager, an owner, an investor. And we have to start thinking in those terms ourselves, so that when we talk about economic development for us, we don't want just the job. We don't want to just be the employee and draw the check. We also want to be the owner. We want to be the manager. We want to be somebody who is in charge, right? To do that, of course, we've got to summon our own resources. We have to look upon whatever strategies people bring to us, whether it's from the city government or the state government, the federal government, say, how is this designed to build up the number of business owners? How is this designed to build up the number of managers? How is this designed to build up the base, the economic base within our community, so we don't just become the drawers of water and the hewers of wood? We always have been able to tote, and we've always been able to carry. We've always been able to be the employee, but we want to be the employers also. We want to be the managers. We want to be the people who are part of the process of being in charge. And I speak of that because we look at one of the ways that government can indeed be helpful is you look at all the billions of dollars that government spends at the city level, at the state level, at the federal level. And I'm telling you, because the Department of Business Services is part of the process within this administration, which is looking to fundamentally change the way that the city of New York does its business. The city of New York, in the past, has basically taken on an approach which has been sexually biased, has been racially biased, and which has seen to it that, by and large, people of color and women do not participate in the business activity of the city of New York. And we had a mayor, and I won't call his name, but we had a mayor who was going around saying, how am I doing? And the question was, what are you doing? And what he was doing was keeping his shoulder up against the door of opportunity. And while in Atlanta, in Los Angeles, in Chicago, in Philadelphia, in Washington, D.C., even the home of David Dukes, the state of Louisiana, had a progressive program for bringing in minorities and women to do business with the state of Louisiana before David Dinkins became the mayor of the city of New York and established that kind of program here in New York City. And you have to ask yourself, why? You want to know why? The reason is very simple, that because we did not exercise our political power to translate it into some type of economic development initiative that made sense for us. And so we could have a mayor walking around here talking about how am I doing and saying we don't want to have any kind of, quote, quota program with respect to bringing people of color and women into the business activity of the city of New York. But I don't recall all these people who talk about they don't like quotas having a problem when the effective quota was 0 for our people for all these many years. I didn't have a problem with the quota then, but when we start talking about having some affirmative efforts, some progressive efforts, some productive efforts to fundamentally change the way the city of New York does business, I'm telling you, because I hear it all the time, people now are talking about we're taking something from them. All right? And what we're taking from them, and you're damn right we're taking from them, is the expectation that life is going to be the way it was. What we're taking from them is the advantage that they've had for so many years, the advantage that came from other people being excluded from the process. That advantage is gone. That advantage is not going to be a part of the way that the city of New York does business, and we are about making that change happen. And I'll also tell you that there's a lot of people who work for the city of New York, because we're going to speak frankly here today in this summit, I know, There's a lot of people who work for the city of New York, and they're waiting David Dinkins out. They're waiting him out as sure as I'm standing here, because they say, yes, he signed the executive order, the historic executive order establishing this initiative, this progressive initiative for getting women and people of color to be able to do business with the city of New York, a $650 million goal for this fiscal year, the largest municipally based program of its type any place in the United States, and they're waiting him out. They're waiting him out because they know anybody that you've heard of who has been mentioned as a, quote, serious candidate for mayor has already said they're against this type of program. And they know that the day somebody else is mayor other than this mayor, that program is gone. That program, so they're going to wait him out. And they're going to drag their feet, and they're going to try to keep their head low, because if we find out what they're doing, of course, that's a very different story. But they're going to try and do as little as possible to advance this program, waiting out this mayor, and we are going to look to move forward in a very real fashion. In closing, let me just say this. There's a past, there's a present, there's a future. Our past, of course, is replete with stories of how we have overcome challenges and how we're going to move forward. Our present, we obviously have to look at our circumstances and our situation and see what our resources are, what our capabilities are, and how we'll move forward. And of course, our future, I believe, can be a very bright one, a very positive one, if we but move together, in a powerful way, in a way that says we recognize what brings us together in the very first place, and we recognize that our future is one that we can share together. So I look forward to a very successful summit, and thank you very much.
We'd like to recognize the Honorable Deloise Blakely, who is the Deputy Mayor of Harlem and also President of New Future Foundation. We'd like to recognize the Honorable Archie Springer, who is a member of the New York City Council. And Mr. Alfonso Green, Director of Commercial Development for the Borough of Queens, and he's here representing the Borough President's office. And now we'd like to have Congressman Major Owens, who has joined us, bring you remarks. Congressman Owens, I neglected to mention to you earlier that Congressman Owens and Congressman Towns are co-chairs of the summit. And now we will have remarks by Congressman Owens, who will greet you.
Thank you. First of all, let me apologize for being late. I was invited to lead a Little League parade and throw out the first ball, and I thought that I'd have 50 to 100 kids, and I could get it over with quickly. This was in Park Slope, a new part of my district. I found 15 blocks of kids, forever and ever, marching on. I finally had to leave before the game began. At any rate, I'm here, and I want to welcome you as co-chairman of this second African American Summit here in the city of New York. I am here late, but I intend to stay all day, and I intend to be very much of proceedings which I think are very important. These summits are convened on the principle that there is an agenda above and beyond partisan considerations, above and beyond group considerations, an agenda that ought to apply to all African Americans, an agenda that we can all agree upon. And the two primary concerns of this particular summit, education and economic development, are certainly items that we can all agree upon in general. More specifically, I hope we can get down to understanding that we ought to leave this conference with some concrete actions in mind. I'll leave this conference with a new level of awareness as to what ought to be done. Now, we are in the city of New York, and we are more than 2 million strong. It ought to mean a great deal. We ought to be the model of economic development for African Americans throughout the nation. You have to start with jobs, because jobs are a part of the economic process. Without jobs, you don't get income to create savings, which end up being capital to start businesses. You have to start with jobs. And we need to deal with job policies in this city. We need to deal with the fact that some of the best jobs in this city are still off limits for African Americans. The city residency law that used to exist many years ago, before we became such a large part of the population, there was a residency law which said the best jobs have to be reserved for New Yorkers. You don't give away the teachers' jobs, you don't give away the firemen's jobs, you don't give away the policeman's jobs, you don't give away the sanitation jobs to people who live in the surrounding suburbs and in New Jersey. Sanitation civil service tests, 100,000 people applied, coming from all over the metropolitan area. Sanitation worker. Police, we're going toward a new exam, and they're recruiting in churches, and a lot of activity about getting more minorities. You will get no greater percentage of minorities this time than you got last time, because we are still in a recession. No matter what the Republicans in Congress say, we're still in a recession, which means that you'll have people from the suburbs and from New Jersey who have master's degrees and PhDs who can't find jobs, taking that police exam, and they'll push down our people. We cannot compete in that kind of arena. People know how to take tests. The test doesn't tell you how to be a good policeman. It just measures how well you can take tests. So those people will take the jobs. We need a residency law like the rest of the villages and the counties and the cities in New York State have. We need to reserve those jobs, not only for economic development, because they give better service if they know the city better. So jobs are part of it. Jobs coming down hard on agencies that contract with the city, coming down hard on them and making them abide by the anti-discrimination laws. We have what we call a prevailing wage law. That's a federal law. And the Comptroller's office has people who go out and monitor every job to make sure that the prevailing wage law is being observed. We don't have anything when it comes to laws related to discrimination in this town. Jobs are very important. Jobs and economic development go hand in hand. And then, of course, the economic development begins when you get contracts. And as Mr. Ford said, the mayor's policy on contracts has to be implemented. Let's get on with it, because there are too many people lingering around who do want to sabotage it. They should have been gotten rid of a long time ago, but they do want to sabotage it. We have to make certain that it goes forward. We have to make certain also that the consumer power in this, we have consumer power. That's a part of the equation of economic development. Consumer power means consumers can choose where they shop. Consumers can choose what services they use. We ought to have greater impetus to organize our consumer power, because there are corporations based in New York City. New York City is a big market, and we're a big part of that market. There are corporations based in New York City that don't have any blacks on the board, still, at this late date. We did an analysis and had a meeting at Dr. Cave's office once, and major corporations have some still have no blacks, and then none of them have blacks from Brooklyn, by the way, since we're having this summit in Brooklyn. We got major problems. The gentleman says 2 of them have blacks in Brooklyn. I did an analysis of 50 beyond the list that we had at Dr. Cave's office, and I assure you, if there are 2 out of 50, I'd be surprised, but that'll be good. Now, beyond economic development, and closely related to it, interrelated with it, jobs and economic development, is education. In this complex society of ours, you don't survive in business unless you have education. You know, they say that the first requirement for being in business is the predator's instinct. You have to go for the jugular and know how to really move in there and get what you want. That's the first requirement in this capitalist economy. It may be true, but the people who like that, who can succeed nowadays, are zero unless they know how to buy and select the expertise and the information that they need along with that. Nobody survives in this business climate unless they are aware of the fact that you need tremendous amount of expertise and education and information. So our folks have to understand that, and education in this city is a disgrace. The public school education is a disgrace and getting worse all the time. We've had the Board of Education hijacked by a group of people who have a political agenda that has nothing to do with children. They don't care. We have to take back the Board of Education. We have to insist and do some unusual things. I don't know what they are. Beyond the search for a new chancellor, because we got 4 people who have the votes, and they're going to put any bum they want to in there. They don't care whether he knows anything about education, has a vision or any concerns that relate to our concerns. They don't care. Some kind of confrontation, some kind of obstacle has to be placed in the way of this group that's snowballing forward with a process that may deliver the final coup de grace in terms of establishing once and for all for the next few years that nothing is going to happen positively in the education system. Our children are in prisons. Our children are in prisons. High schools that have no extracurricular activities, no bands, no drama groups, no nothing except you go to school and you sit down in class and be yelled at by people. There's a prison atmosphere. Added to that is the fact that you have to go past metal detectors that really don't stop violence in schools. You stop violence in schools when you give kids alternatives to let off that energy in positive ways. All of this goes on and on, while less and less education gets accomplished. And in Washington, all they want to do is establish new tests, new standards and new tests. And the great fight in Washington right now is to say, you can establish your standards and your tests, but we're not going to vote for that unless you have also opportunities to learn delivery systems. The federal government has to put money into making the delivery systems work and be critical of the way the state set up the education system and the way the schools are operated. So this is a very important summit. Everything is very much closely interrelated. I want to congratulate Dr. Cave, Reverend Flake, and the people who conceived of this idea in the first place, and also congratulate all my colleagues who are assembled here on helping to move the idea forward. We need unity. There are so many issues that we could march together on, and we must march together on in order to survive. Thank you very much.
And thank you very much, Congressman Owens. We would now like to bring to you the Honorable Lenora Fulani, who will bring you very brief greetings.
First of all, I'd like to acknowledge the dais guests and the organizers of the summit. I'm very honored to be here. I actually flew in from LA 2 days ago, where I was in the streets of South Central and Watts in response to requests from community leaders out there who asked me to come in and do some work with them, as well as I went out to work on a campaign for an African American who's running for mayor. I just wanted to briefly share a thought that I had, because I also have another meeting that's happening at this very moment. A guest of mine from Washington, D.C. is speaking at Reverend Sharpton's meeting, and I have to run off to that. One of the issues of being in LA was watching all of the energy that went into cooling out the African American community. Black leaders, liberals and conservatives, were telling black folks to cool out. And I guess I'm not in a position to cool out the militancy and radicalness of our people. In fact, I'm much more prepared to figure out how to use that militancy and radicalness so that it works in our behalf. People have the right to be outraged at the level of injustice in this country. One of the reasons why there's such an effort to cool us out is because of the failed educational system and the failed economic system. And there's a way in which people talk about politics and economics as if they don't go hand in hand. You can't have political power in this country unless you have economic power, and vice versa. And that's a real issue in our communities and something that we have to deal with straight up. One of the things that happened in LA after the aftermath of the riots is the mayor of that city and the corporations came together in an effort to rebuild LA. And what happened was that the corporations got all kinds of tax breaks because the people in political power weren't looking after black folk. And the 75,000 to 90,000 jobs that were supposed to come into the city have not come in. Less than 5,000 jobs have been provided there. And so who benefited from the aftermath of the riots are corporate America, not the black and Latino community. Here in New York City, we cannot talk about economic failure or educational failure without tying those two things together. In fact, from the vantage point of the people who run New York City, of the corporations who have control over the economy of the city, the educational system is working quite well. Because the educational system is equipping people to work in a place where there are no jobs. In fact, the success of that system is the fact that our young people are forced to stand on the streets without a future and without a vision. And if we're going to have a serious dialogue here today, that's one of the things that has to be dealt with. We can't just talk about educational reform. We have to talk about the failure of this economic system. Many people are now speaking about Clinton's plan to retrain all of the people who are now losing their jobs, not just people on welfare, not just the unemployed, but also the working poor. But if in fact people are retrained, where are the jobs they're going to go get unless ordinary people in our communities and ordinary people in our country have the kind of political clout to turn this thing inside out? So we've had millions of conferences and summits and meetings where we speak about the economy, where we speak about politics, and where we speak about education. What we have to do is come out of here today and out of all the work that we do in this city over the next year with a serious plan to grab enough political power for our people so that we can educate our kids, so that we can build something together, so that we don't have to come together next year and do this dialogue over and over again. If we don't deal with the failure of the economic system, we can't build an educational system for young people. We don't need to be cooled out. We need to stand up and fight for political and economic power so that our kids can get educated. Thank you very much.
The Nation of Islam talked about education and economic development. The NAACP talked about education and economic development. In the 60s and 70s, today we talk about the miracle of Atlanta, a $400 million airport. Black Americans got 30% of that public work project, and Atlanta changed. Here in New York, and Wallace can testify to this, that on the drawing boards right now, there are plans for $51 billion worth of construction in the city of New York over the next 10 years. Just think about it. If African Americans got 5%, 10%, 20%, 30% of that $51 billion, what a difference this community might look like. But getting from there to here will take work. The challenge as we move into the 21st century is to harness the energy and the capability that exists in our community. We are closing the gap in political development. We are closing the gap in the question of the gap between education between white America and African America. But brothers and sisters, it's sad to report today that the gap in the economic area, not only is it not closing, but it is actually widened as we sit here today. One of the organizations that has been playing a significant role in trying to help us close that gap is the New York Black United Fund. It is ironic as we meet here today that you ought to know that the first Black United Fund was organized in Los Angeles after the Watts Rebellion, not of last year, but in 1965. It was called the Brotherhood Crusade. The Black United Fund in New York, Los Angeles, and around the country has stayed on the case of trying to harness our collective economic effort. It gives me great pleasure to introduce to you the President and Executive Director of the New York Black United Fund, who has already made his contribution to this summit, but financing the bulk of this summit, Mr. Kermit Eady.
Good morning. Can I have that again? You heard what Wallace said. He said, if you don't do it louder, I'm going to be here a long time. Good morning. Good morning. Thank you, brothers and sisters. It is indeed an honor for me to be with you this morning and to speak about economic development. It is something that I have been involved with for quite some time, and it grew out of my history of growing up on a farm in the South plowing a mule. And some of you may know something about that. Many of you may not like to know something about that. But it's a saying that my dad used to say when he would wake us up. There were 5 boys in the family, and even the girls, and 4 girls. And when he'd be waking us up at 5:30 in the morning before we would go to school to go plow the mule, and we'd be grumbling under our breath. And sometimes he'd hear that grumbling, and he had one favorite statement that he made all the time. If you take care of the land, we'll take care of you. I didn't understand that then and didn't care about it. I sure understand it now. But let me, before I start in my presentation with you this morning, give thanks to Stephen Davis and to Dr. Jackson, to Congressman Owens and to Congressman Flake and Dr. Cave and all others who really worked diligently in putting this effort together. And Stephen has been really working very hard because he is what we call the hired gun. He's the one that does all the work and the rest of us give input. And I know what that's about because I run an organization where I do all the work and everybody else give input. Somebody's got to do the work. Another thing I would like to do while I'm in the presence of Major Owens, and have not had the opportunity to do this publicly, and I did it, I was with him once, I think last year, at the same time, and he had to leave before I presented. In 1989, the Black United Fund became the first organization in this country to manage what is called the Combined Federal Campaign, the Federal Charity Drive. That is where federal employees give their charitable dollars or their philanthropic dollars through a campaign called CFC, Combined Federal Campaign. And we got the contract to manage that campaign in 1989. The United Way had it since its inception in 1962. And not only were we the first to get the contract, most definitely that also meant we were the first blacks to have received the contract. And you would be interested to know at that time it was the largest contract awarded to any black institution, agency, or business in this country, a $2 million contract. But what I want to let Major Owens know that he may not know is that the very first year that we received the contract, we raised more dollars than United Way had ever raised with a less administrative cost in the 32-year history that they had it. In any one of those 32-year histories, we beat the first year by we beat their best year by $3,000. And folks tried to play that down, Major, and said, that doesn't mean much. To us, if it was 3 cents, as long as we beat them, and they had it for 32 years prior to us getting it. The second year, we beat the best year by $150,000, and they tried to play that down. The third year, we beat the best year by $210,000. And the fourth year, they bought my staff. But what I want, and that happens to be true. So the Federal Executive Board then said, Kermit, you don't have the staff anymore. United Way bought the staff. So I wanted you to know that's the kind of arena we're in, but that makes us proud because we know that we must be doing something right. And of course, we don't let that bother us. God fixes where we go on to greater and bigger things, because our Lord always makes that possible for us. But I'm particularly speaking to Major Owens, the Congressman Owens, because Congressman Owens was gracious enough to be one of our campaign chairpersons the second year that we had that campaign. And I am just grateful, and I wanted him to know that on the very personal level, we didn't let him down. We don't have the contract anymore, but we're very proud of what happened. We had the experience, and we don't have it because they bought the people who were working for us to do it. But we wanted you to know, Congressman, that we did not let you down. Everything was wonderful, and we beat the system. So we thank you very much for your help and support on that one. As we go on and we begin to talk about economic development, because that's what it's all about, and again, that's why I'm glad to be with you, because this is something I've been talking about now for a long time. It really boils down to land, institutions, and ownership. It boils down to that. If you don't have land, you don't have power. If you think I'm joking, all you've got to do is understand what wars are fought over. Even if you read the Old Testament, there's a whole lot in the Old Testament talking about land. If you take a look at what's going on in South Africa, or what's going on in the Middle East, the whole issue is about land and what God put into the earth. There's a scripture in Psalms that says, the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. It's long overdue that we as a people begin to understand that God put the riches in the earth. We don't know of any riches in the sky other than where we're going after we leave here. But since we're here, everything that we wear, everything that we own, everything that is in this room comes from God's earth. Every single thing. If any one of you in this room has got something that didn't come from the earth right now, I want to know about it. So if we understand that, then we should understand very clearly the importance of land and ownership. Yesterday I was sitting down in a meeting, or day before yesterday, with a friend and colleague of mine that we're working together with now and doing some business in the area of mortgage brokerage and that kind of thing. And we were going over some numbers. In the 5 boroughs of New York, in the 4 boroughs of New York, excluding Manhattan, and we excluded Manhattan for a purpose, Nassau and Suffolk County, the foreclosure rate on private homes is $25,000 per year, and 30% of those are black owned. Less than 10% redemption. Did you hear those numbers? $25,000 a year being foreclosed, 30% owned by blacks, and less than 10% redemption rate. What is that saying to us? First of all, we don't have financial institutions anymore in our community. If you don't have financial institutions in the community, there's no place for you to get any money. If any of you saw Channel 13 about a year ago when they did the whole piece on what happened in Chicago with some folks, and all of the financial institutions moved out of the community, and when they tried to get a loan to refurbish their home with good credit, good everything, they were turned down because it was said, we don't like the location of the property. If there's no investment coming into the community, the location of the property becomes superfluous because it's automatically going to go down and stay down. So we're being denied in every turn. If we don't have financial institutions, which in my opinion, we must have in our communities, we must have a place to get capital. I don't need to tell any of you in this room what happens when you go to a bank. When you take some of your major banks, even Citibank, you're going to be very fortunate if you can get a loan over $50,000, being black. It's not there. But let me also explain to you some of what is happening with the Citibanks and the Greenpoint banks. They're stockpiling. Many of those 2 banks in particular hold a lot of your mortgages. So they're stockpiling that property because they're not in a position to do anything about it. That's not what they're trained to do. So they're now taking homes and they're just there. It's costing them money to maintain them and to upkeep them. That $25,000 a year. They're now finding themselves in a lot of trouble. So now you're beginning to take a look at one of the reasons why the banking industry is going down. They're holding on to property and nothing that can be done with it because they're foreclosed on property. We are not, as a people, taking advantage of bailing that property out and making it productive. Something Brother Ford said earlier, and when I listened to him talk and others who spoke, I said to myself, I don't know what I'm going to say, but I always trust in the good Lord to provide me with what needs to be said. When he said that we've got to be prepared, I want to reemphasize that. It is not enough for us to march and demonstrate and open doors. Because if we take a look at us historically, we have marched, we have opened doors, and we must continue to do that. But other people have reaped the benefits of our marching and our opening doors because we haven't had structure in place. We were not prepared to receive what we fought for. So when Wallace Ford and Mayor Dinkins put in new programs for contracts to come to black and minority people, if we don't have the structure in place, they're going to have a rough time awarding us contracts. And we're still going to be saying the mayor didn't do anything. It is incumbent upon us, all of us in this room, to put those structures in place. We have got to understand very clearly what building an infrastructure is all about. We've got to understand very clearly what a community support and delivery system is all about. When we take a look in this country at the Fortune 500, the 8% that owns 80% of the wealth in this country, they're the same people. They sit on each other's boards of directors. They're not a whole lot of separate people. And they coalesce to control the masses because that's where they get their money. When we take a look at the U.S. Senate in particular in this country, they come from corporate America. So the policies that are being made are policies that's going to reflect those corporations. and policies that are going to provide jobs and ownership for them when they leave government office and are in positions to do even more for themselves and go back to those corporations. So what is behind our politics is our economics. If we want Congressman Owens to do something in the black community that is revolutionary, we'd better make sure that Congressman Owens is getting all of his money from us. My daddy also used to say, "He who pays you sways you." We once asked a major magazine, one of the major magazines, black magazines in this country, to do a story, a major piece on the Black United Fund. This magazine has never until this day done a piece on Black United Fund. And we asked the owner of this publication to do this story. And the owner said, "I sure like what you're doing, but I'm not going to write a story about you." And I said, "What? We're not going to write a story about you. Those corporations where you're trying to gain access for people to give to the Black United Fund is where I get my money for my ads. I just want us to face certain realities as we build, so that all of us need to understand the positions that we're in. If we find ourselves and allow ourselves to get in catch-22 positions, then we can sit here and have summits until Jesus returns and not one single thing is going to happen. Not one benefit is going to take place. Because I can't do anything for you if my total allegiance is outside the community. We understand coalitions. We understand networking and interlocking. But as a friend of mine says very clearly, it is no longer enough for us to talk about we're going to stick together just because we're the color of our skin. We know that's just not true, brothers and sisters. That's why this room is not packed. So the other thing we got to do is we got to do business. We've got to do business with each other, because that then presents us with another reason why we've got to stay together. Because I get angry with you, or you get angry with me, and we wind up not speaking anymore over something foolish. Because there's nothing pulling us back together. If we're in bed doing business together, something's going to pull us back together. The dollar is. The economics is. So we've got to be about doing business together. It's no longer enough just to say that just because we are black, while it may be enough to keep the fibers of other ethnic groups in this country together, for some reason, and we all have ideas about those reasons, it's not keeping us together. So let's get on about the business of doing some business. Let's deal with some land and some ownership. 2 years ago, all of you in this room by now probably know of a place in Carolina called Hilton Head. 20 years ago or 25 years ago, many of you probably have never heard of it. I grew up in that part of the country. Hilton Head was all black. You didn't find white folks on Hilton Head at all. Now some of the riches of the world is on Hilton Head. And the outer islands, Ladies Island, St. Phelps Island, St. Helena's Island, even Paris Island, all that's part of Beaufort County. What's happening in that part of the country? There's more development going on in that part of the country right now than any other part of this USA.
Thank you for tuning in this week. Hope you enjoyed this show about stuff. See you next time.